Okay, so the question was around examples of raising capital. So we have it both from fellows investing into other ventures as part of the fellowship, but also more broadly from people outside of the fellowship. So just to say, we have like a syndicate, or at least a platform for investors who are part of the fellowship to find out about deals that they can invest in. So it makes it a bit easier for them. We have a bunch of them, either directly putting money in, and at this stage it's tended to have been smaller type of amounts, like in the kind of hundreds of thousands figures, rather than in the millions. But often what happens is that people start with kind of seed investments, and then often they will make follow-on investments after that as well. So I hope that helps. So it's a mixture, is the short answer. And it's A, fellows directly investing in ventures, but also B, giving advice and help to with support. So a bunch of people say EHF Fellows helped me get funding from others. They gave a bunch of review or feedback on my pitch deck, or the structuring of the deal, or the valuation, or the particulars that will help people actually raise funds. Next question: in the application where we upload files, should we submit a business plan or PDF as a PDF slide deck, or is that something that comes later? Okay, so long story short, in the application form, you can attach documents. And for us, it's not mandated that you attach any documents, but you can do that. You can add letters of recommendation. You can add your CV. Often people just have that through LinkedIn, so that kind of covers it off. Or you can do a pitch deck, or a slide deck for your venture, or other kind of documents that are helpful. What I would say is that they're not compulsory, but it kind of depends on what you're doing. It can be helpful. Being brief or concise is helpful, rather than adding a 100-page document. Hope that helps. So just to add to your question as well, so if you have something you want to share with us, like a slide deck, better to do it in your application, I think, rather than later in the process. Next, can one member apply in 2 or 3 different teams? Okay, so I think your question is, can you be part of multiple teams that apply at once? So there's nothing stopping that, is the short answer. Yeah, and we would kind of assess the merits of each of the teams that you're applying with. I guess a question at our end might be, how much are you committing to a particular team if you're part of multiple teams? Next, I'd like to know about government funding for the new enterprises, please. Okay, so it's going to be context specific. There is government funding in multiple ways. So one is through connecting with, let me close something. Sorry, I'm just closing the poll because it's distracting me. It's got a timer that's still ticking away in the background. So there's government funding in different ways. One is through research funding, so universities or other groups that can provide, basic research or R&D for your work. There can be some access to talent that way through universities and research institutes. Another way would be through, currently there are still growth grants of cash grants for R&D, and also the government's transitioning more towards giving tax credits for R&D. So those would be broad sort of avenues there. And the specifics will depend on what you're doing. So it's worth, if you look at Callaghan, CALLAGN Innovation, Google them, that's probably a good starting point. But there are other organizations beyond them as well, but that's a good starting place. Next question, is it only that if I have a business venture, I will qualify for this global impact program? Because I do have a business plan, but also I want to do something which shall touch human lives. Can I state the vision and plan of mine? Okay, so in some ways actually this links to selection criteria. So it will cover it off there. Long story short, we try and select based on the person rather than the venture, but we do learn about the person through the venture. But anyway, I'll come back to that when we go through the slides. If there are any other particular questions, then then feel free to add them in now. If not, and we've got one more that's coming already. If not, we'll go through the slides. I'll just start by talking about our selection criteria, and then we'll go through the other slides as well. Next question, you're a SAP data DevOps engineer with vast experience, looking for startup ideas for something which can contribute to environment and climate innovation, already submitted for EHF. You'd appreciate if you can explain a bit about it. I'm not sure what your question is there around explain a bit about it. But maybe what I'll do there is, maybe if you could reframe your question, I might be able to add, give an answer that's more helpful. But also I might cover it off in the slides. We'll kind of give a bit of a description about EHF. Next, I have a content venture which already has seed funding. It's not tech heavy. Are you open to content ventures or have a history of it? Okay, so this again probably comes to selection criteria. We do have, for example, we have people who prepare content in the environmental area around helping people visualize the state of the planet in different ways. So, energy use or shipping or those type of things, or biodiversity. So, yeah, we do have people who provide content. But a key thing for us is people who are doing stuff that's going to positively contribute to things that get to the heart of big problems. That's a key thing for us. So I'm just going to jump now to selection criteria in our slide deck, which I will power up now. And I think that'll help the other three questions. And if there are any other questions that you want me to cover off before going through the slides, and I'll start with selection criteria first and kind of see where the slides are going here. Okay, so there's another question added in, so I'll answer that first before coming to the slides. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen with you first. Bear with me for a second. Okay, here we go. You can see my screen. Okay, so I'll answer your question first. Your question is, can you tell me about starting a volunteering organization through EHF? So this kind of fits with selection criteria again, but the broad thought here is that we select people who are working on for-profit ventures and non-profit ventures. It's not specifically around whether you're working on creating content per se or a volunteering organization per se. It's more around our selection criteria, which I'll cover off here. Okay, so selection criteria. So you can see here are 5 areas for our selection criteria. I'll talk through each of these. First one is having a bold vision to solve systemic challenges. So I'll talk about what we mean by a bold vision. I'll talk about what we mean by systemic challenges. So systemic challenges, that's things that get to the heart of big problems. So if you're doing that, then you're working on a systemic challenge. If you have a bold vision, what we mean by that is people who are doing things that are innovative. So if you're just doing what everyone else has done and there's nothing different about it, then that's less helpful for us. And maybe another piece is if you say you're going to solve a systemic challenge, then that gives us sort of an idea of scale in terms of what you're seeking to achieve in terms of ambition. Okay, so that covers that off, having a bold vision to solve systemic challenges. Next is people who can deliver on their vision. I think that's relatively self-explanatory in terms of what does delivering on your vision mean. But what I'll talk about is how do we at EHF, how do we assess your ability to deliver on your vision, or just in general beyond the particular vision that you've set in your application, your ability to create positive change or create impact, if you like. So the most easy way for us to see your ability to deliver on your vision is if you have a track record of it. So if you've created a venture or ventures or particular things that you can point to and you can say, here are the areas where I was responsible, here was the type of progress that I created with said resources, that helps us get a sense of what you can do. So that for us, that makes that part a bunch easier. Second part is around, or beyond that, there are other ways as well. So we'll look at people's backgrounds in terms of their career, the professional experience that they've got, Also voluntary experience, academics where that's appropriate as well, and also where we don't just look at what you're working on now, we also look at what you've worked on in the past. And if you're able to demonstrate your ability to deliver on your work, or your vision rather, in previous projects, then maybe we don't need to test your current venture quite as much. So say, for example, if you've got a track record of a few startups or ventures, could be non-profits or for-profit that you've been involved with, and we can see what you've done there. And maybe you're just like, hey, and I've got some other ideas of what I want to do now, but I'm still figuring it out. Or maybe we would be more like, okay, well, it's okay because we've already seen evidence of your ability to deliver. But if you don't have as much of a track record, then we probably focus a little bit more on the progress you've achieved with your current venture to get a sense of your ability to deliver. So I hope that helps. And again, as I mentioned before, we're focusing on the person rather than selecting a venture, but we learn about the person through their current and previous ventures. In particular, what type of impact did they create with the resources they had available? Third, in terms of our selection criteria, is around the ability to build long-term connections with New Zealand. So I think that's maybe relatively self-explanatory in terms of what being able to build a long-term connection with New Zealand looks like. But maybe I'll just talk about how we seek to test it, or the evidence that we would look at to get a sense of whether we think you've got potential to connect deeply with New Zealand long-term. So one is, how much time have you been here already? Some people are here already, some people have spent particular time. Second is how much research you've done on the particulars of what you want to do in New Zealand and how committed you are to that. Does it add up is a big, huge macro question that we ask around New Zealand. Like, would it make sense for you to do that from the head and from the heart, that you'd want to connect deeply with New Zealand? We also look at how much time you might intend to spend in New Zealand. So, and that is how much you would need to spend in New Zealand. Sometimes that would depend on what you're working on. If you're an investor, maybe you could spend a month here, a year, or 2 weeks, or whatever it is, if you're really intentional, and you could positively contribute. If you're wanting to build a new venture, then likely that would take more time. Fourth is around you being able to actively and positively contribute to the EHF community. So what I'd say about that is it's people who are not just takers, but people who are also givers. People who want the give and take of community, yeah, sure, you get stuff from it, but people who want to contribute as well. And that takes a bit of intentionality, a bit of prioritizing. But also the other thing to say is that we design EHF for people who are busy. So we're not necessarily asking you to put time aside with no benefit. We're seeking to give you benefit through your interactions with us and through the EHF community. Fifth is people who can be good ambassadors for New Zealand and demonstrate EHF Fellows values. And you can see those values listed there on the slide. And also you can find more about these on our apply page and the link shown below as well. So I hope that answers the questions we've got there in terms of qualifying to EHF. To the previous questions we had around content providers or around volunteering organizations, for us it's not like we have a policy around are you creating content or whether you're enabling volunteers. It's around whether you are meeting these selection criteria. Do you have a bold vision? Are you able to execute? Can we see you connecting here and with New Zealand and the EHF community? And the last question we've got here is, you're a team of 2 that applied for EHF looking to start up a venture which promotes eco-friendly technologies. Is there a criteria that we should have a venture registered outside New Zealand to qualify? So there's no particular criteria around that. It all goes back to these selection criteria, is the short answer. I mean, if you're applying as a team, then sure, we would look at how serious you might be about what you're wanting to work on, and maybe if you've made progress with your venture, then that helps us give a sense of what you're both capable of, or how many in your team, what you're capable of. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to skip back to the start of the slide deck and cover off a few more things around the basics of EHF, Do keep the questions coming. I'll keep answering the questions as they come. I've currently answered as best I can the questions that we've got so far. I'm going to go through slides. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about what the fellowship is, a bit about New Zealand, and then a bit more about how you can get involved with the fellowship. Again, keep the questions coming. So here are some photos or pictures or snapshots, mugshots of cohort 5 that we just recently selected. So these people will be welcome to New Zealand in October this year, and really looking forward to spending some time with them, getting to know them all some more. So I want to, maybe a good way for me to let you know about the fellowship is to describe, give you some examples of some of the people that we've selected. So this is Sam Jones. She's one of our Kiwi fellows. She works, as you might tell from the background there, in the textile industry. Her company, so the Yellow Little Bird or Little Yellow Bird, I always forget which way around it is. Anyway, they help prepare uniforms with fabrics that are environmentally and socially responsible. And they're doing really well. They're also developing a tool to help track how clothing is produced and get a sense of its ethics as it goes through its supply chain. So Kiwi Fellow. We also have international fellows. The rest of them, I think, here are international. So here's Nathan Doctor. He is part of cohort 3, and he's working on a couple of things. He's working on 2 education products that help people learn to code or help employers figure out people's coding skills. And he's also an investor in blockchain-related ventures and protocols. And him and his wife are both part of EHF. They're a couple, and they applied separately, and were both accepted. This is Erin Crampton, also part of cohort 3. She is working with farmers, both in Canada and in New Zealand, to help them be more environmentally sustainable. And she's been doing that at a few different levels, kind of like at a policy or industry level, bringing together a whole bunch of producers. She's got a background as an entrepreneur as well in terms of food business, and she's working with farmers here in New Zealand to help them be more environmentally sustainable. Here we have Neeraj Meha, and he has a background as an investor. He founded an investment firm called Kilowatt Capital. Now he's managing a private family office, and he's particularly interested in how to invest in things that are going to not just give financial returns, but also environmental and social returns as well. Here we have Blanche Kara, who's one of our fellows, also I think cohort 3 or 4. She is working with a medical technology startup to try and find new ways to diagnose ailments. She's originally from Uganda. Okay, so those are a few examples of some of our EHF fellows from recent cohorts. Maybe I'll just describe here what it actually looks like being part of the fellowship in terms of, on a day-to-day level or week-to-week level. So first is we have cohort 5, who I showed you some mugshots of earlier at the start, all their friendly faces. So they'll be welcomed in October. They'll be together for a week, and they'll really get to know each other well and build trust. And then at the end of that period, we bring together EHF fellows from across all sorts of different cohorts. So if you've just joined cohort 5 for this group, they'll get to know people from cohorts 1 to 4 as well, which is a great way to build connections. And for people in cohorts that were welcomed to New Zealand earlier, to reconnect with each other and keep those relationships strong. So it's the first thing around those key gatherings, the cohort retreats and welcoming new cohorts. Also listed there on the top is New Frontier Summit. So we have them currently once a year. So if people apply for cohort 6, there'll be a New Frontier Summit in early next year at the end of your welcome week, and that'll give you a chance to connect with people who are part of New Zealand's broader ecosystem. People from government and corporates and startups and non-profits. Secondly, here we have regional gatherings. So for example, in Wellington, there's a monthly dinner barbecue for people to connect with other people who are part of the fellowship. Someone's asked, can anyone attend New Frontiers Summit? Short answer is yes. Anyone can buy a ticket for New Frontiers. Next, we have ways of connecting online and informal collaboration. So we have a community portal where people can list projects. You can see who's going to be in your neck of the woods, who's going to be in your town at a particular time, and meet up with them. There are projects there. There's this investment, ways to find investment. So there's online connections to keep the fires burning between key events, but also informal collaborations as well. So a lot of the magic happens amongst people building friendships and relationships with people who are part of the fellowship, and then often there'll be sometimes joint ventures or overlaps between people's projects that they end up working on together. And lastly, the EHF team can provide some support as well. So for example, we do some things to help cohorts reconnect with each other. For example, like a monthly call where everyone in the cohort gets together and reconnects with each other. We have a question about whether there are any fellows in Singapore that you can meet and learn more about their experience. So what I'd say there is, if you look through our stories page, if you go to stories.ehf.org with a few HTTPs probably in there as well at the start, you can look through and find some of our fellows. We do have some EHF fellows from Singapore, for example, Rebecca Paranjothi and co from who are doing work around women sanitation, and Audrey Tan as well. So you can find them there, and then probably the best way is to reach out to them on a platform like LinkedIn is probably the best way forward there. Okay, so here are some pictures from a New Frontier Summit from a while back. Okay, what's the value you get as being part of the fellowship? First piece is the visa, and we'll come to that in a bit more detail. And that's for people who are internationals. But also, second is community. So being part of the community, people there to help you, give moral support, help share their connections, access to capital and different things. We'll come to that in a little bit in terms of the particulars there. And then next, the fellowship helps open doors. So in coming to New Zealand and saying, I'm part of the EHF Fellowship, there are a bunch of people who know what that is, and that kind of gives a signal of confidence or trustworthiness, as well as the doors that EHF can directly open in terms of introducing you to people from government or other sources. Here are some quotes from EHF Fellows about how the fellowship has been helpful. So I'll just give you 20 seconds to have a read through that. So as you can see here from some of these quotes, the fellowship is helpful both at a personal level, giving moral support for the journey as an entrepreneur, which is often a difficult and can be a lonely journey, as well as practical help around getting set up in New Zealand, around getting access to talent, access to funding, accountability. So helpful both for your venture, but also for you personally as an entrepreneur and as a person. Okay, we've got a question which I'm going to cover, which is, you say you'd like to introduce a venture to New Zealand which is already established in your country. Is that okay? Short answer is we have selected people who are bringing their ventures to New Zealand, like a branch of their venture to New Zealand. So that we have done that in the past. For us, it goes back to our selection criteria rather than just a yes no on that. But we'll be looking at how you'd want to be connecting with New Zealand, what kind of benefits that would bring to New Zealand as well, or how deeply you'd be connecting with New Zealand. Hope that answers that question. Okay, so we've talked a bit about the fellowship. Now I'm going to talk briefly about New Zealand. I'll keep it quick on that, and then how you can get involved in terms of the application process. So New Zealand, here's a bit about the Global Impact Visa. So first thing, it's a very flexible visa. It enables you to do lots of different types of things. It doesn't tie you to one particular project. You can study, work, invest, start up new ventures, very open and flexible, doesn't require you to be in country for any set number of days. A lot of flexibility, very flexible. Next, there are options for pathways for family members to get visas. So your family can apply for a family visas or partner visas to enable them to be in New Zealand. Next, there's a pathway to permanent residency. So after 30 months, so the global impact visa is a 3-year work visa, but after 30 months, you can apply for permanent residency. There are some pieces there around being actively involved with the fellowship and getting a letter of support from EHF to support your permanent residency application. But it's much easier, from what I understand, than some other pathways to get to permanent residency. Okay, so a few things about New Zealand. Great place to live, low on corruption, high on civil rights, high on peace, high in terms of being peaceful. It's also a beautiful place, as you might know. New Zealand has been a leader in Indigenous relationships. We've done some work to mend some of the historical scars in terms of Indigenous relationships with Māori. New Zealand's been a progressive country in terms of, for example, the first country to give women the right to vote. Has been a leader in lots of areas, including diversity. New Zealand's a great place not just to live, but a great place to start and scale a venture. It is first in the world in terms of ease of doing business, as well as corruption, which we mentioned before. So it makes it a place where it's easy to trial things out, and a relatively low risk country. So great to try innovative things from here. Great trade connections across East and West, a great and talented workforce as well. Here are a few examples of Kiwi ventures. I'll keep it really quick. Weta Digital, you might know from Lord of the Rings and Avatar, based here. Xero, online accounting software company. Them starting New Zealand was a great launching pad because they could, when they went to Australia and the UK and the US, they could say, look, we've got most of New Zealand hooked up. Here's what we can do at a country level. And you can demonstrate that to what you could do in another country. So because New Zealand's small, it means you can quickly get to national scale, and then you can show to other countries what you can do at national scale. Next, we have LanzaTech, turning waste from the steel industry into biofuels. Second, we have Rocket Lab, who are sending stuff into space. And interesting story, because Peter Beck from Rocket Lab pretty much single-handedly created a space industry in New Zealand. Even like before they got involved, there was no enabling infrastructure policy-wise or physically to enable people to get into space. But the government worked with them, and now they're able to send up a whole bunch more stuff, like way more flights or rocket flights than most other countries. So that's an example of people working with government. And the New Zealand government is low on corruption, but it's also quite reasonable and relational, so you can quickly make progress. And as you can see from Rocket Lab, kind of going from no industry to quickly having some of the most enabling infrastructure for space. How can you get involved? Let's talk about that. We'll talk a bit about the application process as well. Keep the questions coming also. I'll answer them as they come up. Talked about selection criteria. Next, here are key dates. So the early bird deadline closes today. It will depend maybe on which time zone you're in, but I think it's got another just under 8 hours, I think it is, to go. You can see the dates on the application form and the apply page. And then there's a discount, obviously early bird discount. The final date for applications for cohort 6 is the 1st of September. Then from September till December, we will process applications, and then we'll announce who's offered a place no later than December. And then people who are offered a place who are internationals can apply for their global impact visa. And then we'll welcome cohort 6. I put there in March, but it may be in February. So it's February or March. And then from there, the fellowship continues. And there's no end date. In our mind, at least, there's no end date for the fellowship. So the visa's a 3-year, but the community was something that will keep going, assuming that people are wanting to keep being part of the EHF community. So if you apply, first step is to submit your application online. Then there are a series of steps where we shortlist. So for people shortlisted, we go to video interviews, and there could be one or more often there's a series of interviews. Then reference checks. So you don't need to provide reference checks from the start. We'll come to them later. And that's us asking people that know you to either write some stuff about you, answer a few questions in writing, or for us to talk with them briefly. And then the last step is for our independent selection panel to make the final decisions about who's offered a place. And my job and the job of the team that I work with is to prepare a bunch of information to enable the selection panel to make good decisions. And you can see details of our selection panel on our website as well in terms of know who those are. Okay, so how to apply? You can go to ehf.org/apply. If you just go to ehf.org, you'll find the apply page pretty easily. You can express interest if you're not ready to apply yet. Expressing interest just means that we can keep in touch with you, learn a little bit more about you. It's pretty easy to do. So fees, you can see here, $350 per team member for international entrepreneurs, higher for investors, cheaper price for New Zealanders. There are also fees applicable for those who are accepted into the fellowship. You can learn more about those on our apply page. They're all listed there. I won't cover them off here. Okay, key reminder, you got just under 8 hours to apply for early bird applications, and the last date is for cohort 6 applications is 1st of September. We're welcoming a new cohort, and it will either be February or March 2020. Okay, now we've got a space for questions. So we've got one there already. Keep your questions coming. Basically, how we'll do this is I'll keep answering questions until the questions run out. So hit me with lots of questions. First question, are there additional fees when applying for a visa? Do you need a lawyer? Okay, so the answer to that is there can be, okay, so you apply to EHF and there are fees there. And then if you're offered a place, then you apply to Immigration New Zealand, is what you're asking about, the fees there. So you could, there can be fees, it depends on the country. My understanding is the highest fee payable, and this it's worth checking this, you can go on Immigration New Zealand and check the fees for your country. But my understanding is the highest fees are $470 US, either 460 or 470 US dollars. And some countries there's no fees, just depending on the agreements between the countries. And whether you need a lawyer, most people that are fellows, that are accepted who apply don't have a lawyer, but there could be some cases of complexity that it could make sense. So it really depends on your circumstances. But for most people, they're able to do it without a lawyer. So it saves a lot on fees actually at that point in terms of visas. Next question, on average, how many people apply per cohort? So the answer to that is it's in the hundreds that apply, usually like between 300 or 400, that sort of order of magnitude of people who apply as well. The cohort sizes have been getting bigger as well, so we've been selecting more people each time. And part of that is because we're getting better at being able to support people, so we can support a larger group of people each time. We've covered the questions there. Keep them coming. So add in more questions. You can also ask questions around the application process or the application form if that's helpful. If you're someone who's preparing, has a draft application open at present. Okay, no more questions. I'll give it a few seconds. I'll give it another 10 or 15 seconds just in case you're drafting a question right now. Cool, so someone's saying that they're having a problem with the payment gateway. Are there any other payment options? Okay, so thanks for letting us know about that. So if you email applications@ehf.org, we may be able to help with the payment. Linking you to people who will be able to help with that. So email applications@ehf.org. The options, if you look on the website of Submittable, it will list payment options. That's my first thought around what's going to be helpful there. But I'm sorry to say that there are some payment challenges. Next, how many people can be selected in a season of application? I assume you mean in a cohort. Okay, so long story short, for us, it's more around finding people that we think are a strong fit with the fellowship rather than us having a set target. We do have a maximum number of visas that we could, because the government has set for a 4-year period 300 visas. That was my understanding. I can double check that number. But long story short, we have extra visas that we can that we can accept people into the fellowship to then apply for their visas for. So our last group that we selected, there were around 60 people that we selected. So that just gives you a bit of a flavour. But we may select larger or smaller cohorts over time, depending on the number of people that we think are a strong fit with the fellowship. Next, the candidate selection criteria. We've covered that off. I'll just go back to it here so you can see it. So here's the selection criteria to your question. And you can also find those on ehf.org/apply. Next question, you read there were more people that were accepted in cohort 5 but not on the list. Will they be part of cohort 6? And if yeah, that will reduce the number of slots available in cohort 6. Okay, so that's what you're saying there is correct in the sense that we selected a bunch of people recently, and there are some that will join cohort 6. It won't necessarily reduce the number for cohort 6 because it will just mean that we'll be able to have a larger cohort for cohort 6. Part of it was that we have, for our venue for welcoming cohort 5, it had some particular constraints around the number of people that could fit there, but we can have a different venue for welcoming our next cohort as needed to accommodate the size of cohort 6. So in short, no limitations or constrictions on cohort 6 because of what we selected for cohort 5 in terms of capacity constraints. Next, I want to move my family to New Zealand but need time to get the venture off the ground. It could take longer than a 3-year visa. Is there any way to extend? So just to add that there's currently no way to extend per se, but that so as I said, you have the Global Impact Visa is a 3-year visa, and you can apply for permanent residency after 30 months. So after 30 months, you could have permanent. There's the option or the availability. I'm sure there are some criteria there, but you could be on permanent residency at that point. So you wouldn't necessarily need to reapply or re-get or extend your Global Impact Visa. You could be on permanent residence at that point, assuming that you were able to meet the criteria, which broadly is around being active in New Zealand, active in the fellowship, and being a good community member, or not being a bad community member. That's the broad sort of thought around what you'd need to do to get a letter of support from EHF. Obviously, there's more detail there, which we can cover off at a later point if you're offered a place in the fellowship. Okay, we've covered the questions again. Keep them coming though. We'll keep the conversation going as long as there are questions. A few people have joined us recently as well. So keep the questions coming. Is there an HQ for EHF? Where is it? Okay, so most of the EHF team are based in Wellington. We do have people from different parts of the country as well. We have people who work from home. I'm currently working from home, as well as an office in town. It's a shared office space. So it's a bit of a mixture of people people working together and people working working apart. Next question, is there any performance review on our business during the fellowship? So there's no performance review as such. So I'm just about to sneeze at some point. I'm just going to try and mute it in time. So for us, it's not that, it's unlike different visas, the Global Impact Visa. There are some other visas where your visa is the continuation of your visa or the transition to a new type of residency or whatever is conditional on you meeting certain business targets. So it's not like that with EHF. For us, you get the 3-year visa assuming you're not doing anything that is harmful to the community, that will last you for 3 years. There can be we're interested in doing things around having check-ins around that would help people check that they're on plan, or what I mean is like just checking people, helping people follow through on what they're wanting to do. But it's not like, oh, you said you're going to have 3 employees, you only have 2, then you're out. It's not like that. It's more around us trying to work with you to help get the best out of you and encourage you to be able to activate in New Zealand the type of things that you want to be doing. So I hope that's helpful. So long story short, we don't have set requirements. You need to hit this business milestone in order to stay in the country or to have your visa continued. So how it works is there's a 3-year visa. You're part of the community. Assuming you're not doing anything that's damaging the community, you continue to be on that visa and part of the community for 3 years. You can apply for permanent residence after 30 months, and there are some things that we look at in terms of saying, yep, we're going to give this person a letter of support. It's around people being active in New Zealand and around being active in the EHF community. Next, I'm an international who's working already in New Zealand on a work visa. You found different value and payment options. It's a $350 for one applicant. Okay, so if you are not a New Zealand citizen or permanent resident, then and you're applying as an entrepreneur, then you have $350 per person. So if you're just applying by yourself, not in a team, then $350 is the right figure. Next, what happens if a selected member is unable to get a global impact visa before the welcome week, before the welcome event is there, and then it stops? Okay, so there can be options in some cases where, okay, so say you apply with a team of 2, you get your global impact visa, your team member doesn't get your global impact visa. There's a couple of different options. One is that there could be some circumstances whereby your team member could find another type of visa to come to the event. So it could be a business visa or a travel visa or whatever the particulars would fit for your circumstances. And then, there'll be a short-term visa that will enable them to attend the event. The other alternative is they weren't able to attend the event, they could join a later cohort. They could be deferred to cohort 7, for example. Again, we're out of questions. We've covered 24 so far. So good work, everyone, for keeping them coming. But you can do more than that. So if you have any more, send them through. Do it now. Do it soon. Cool, another one. Love it. Question is, after obtaining the Global Impact Visa, is there any limit to the time you must move to New Zealand after being issued the visa? Okay, so say for example, and let's call it January, you get granted the Global Impact Visa. At present, there's a 3-year window that there's a 3-month window in which you'd need to come to New Zealand with that visa to activate it. There can be some circumstances where people can get waivers for that, but our best sense is if people can come to New Zealand to activate their visa, it just gets the visa ticking towards your 30 months before which you can apply for permanent residency as well. So 3-month window, but some possibility of extension depending on circumstances. Next question, you're ready to submit your application but getting a severe spell of imposter syndrome. Thanks for being open about that. Can you share a quick example or 2 of a few fellows who felt the same way? Or say some nice things in general. Thanks for that. Thanks for your openness there. Okay, so what I would say is that when you have a look through the previous cohorts that we've selected, we do have a bunch of people who apply who have demonstrated entrepreneurial track records, but we do have people who we accept who are early in their entrepreneurial journey. And in those circumstances, we look through for their ability to get things done. We look across different things to get a sense of their potential. So no guarantees in your circumstances. We'd need to, that's the purpose of the application, and look forward to reviewing your application and looking through and getting a sense of how you wanted to connect with New Zealand, learning more about your background. Yeah, and I'd say imposter syndrome is probably a common thing for the best of us. So thanks for being open about that. And you said to say a few nice things. I don't know if that was nice, but hopefully that was helpful. Thank you. After the fellowship welcome event, is there any regular meetings or mentorship events that we should attend? Thanks for that question. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are particular parts of the country, there are meetups. So in Wellington, for example, there's a monthly dinner. I know that some cohorts meet up regularly to talk, and it could be, you know, every month on a Zoom call like this, everyone comes together and you can check in with your cohort. Also, over time, there'll be more EHF Fellows. We've got whatever it is, 200 at present. But as we have more cohorts each year, the numbers will get bigger, and that will give us opportunities to find other ways to help connect people in ways that make sense, given the group of people that we can have. There are, as I mentioned earlier in the slides, whenever we welcome a new cohort, we have a space for previous cohorts to come and reconnect with each other. So our next one is in October, for example, will be at the end of when we welcome cohort 5, and it will be people from across cohorts coming together and reconnecting. So they'll be every twice a year. So I hope that helps. There's also online ways of connecting. So our online portal where you can ask questions is WhatsApp channels. There's different ways to connect online as well. Again, we've covered the questions, but I'm sure we've got more. What I'm just going to do is I'm just going to turn the light on in the background because it's probably getting a bit dark for you all. If you can see. So I'll be back in one sec. I was expecting there to be more questions, given that a minute or 30 seconds went by. Okay, so any last questions before we wrap up? Again, we've got more time if there are more questions. I'm happy to help where I can, but do another 10 seconds and then we'll answer the questions that we've got here and then we'll wrap up the call. So do send through any questions if you've got any. Okay, it looks like we've covered off your questions, all 27 of them in total. So thanks for making the time. Thanks for your interest in EHF in New Zealand. Thanks for your questions. I hope you found this useful. I've enjoyed it and look forward to connecting. And if you are someone who is wanting to submit an application, if you're interested in that, then look forward to learning about you through your application. So thanks. Ka kite anō. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.